Jen Bouchard, Hopkins School Board Chair. I'd like to welcome our community members who are joining us via the YouTube live stream. We have a little different schedule this evening. We're going to take more time during our workshop and then start our meeting at 7:45 p.m. this evening. I would like to start out our workshop with just a brief update to my board colleagues and our district leaders and student board reps about our board meeting format, which will be shifting on April 6th to a model that allows for more in-person participation. And we are shifting along with our secondary schools and hoping to parallel that movement. As I've mentioned at previous workshops and meetings, technology has been kind of one of the biggest challenges in terms of how to facilitate meeting with in-person components that still provides for the opportunity for folks to participate virtually, which is recommended as one of the best practices for school board meetings during the pandemic by MSBA, which is the Minnesota School Boards Association. In talking with our student board reps, certainly not all of our student board reps, and so if our board reps who are here would like to add their input, I'd be grateful. But the student board reps I've had the opportunity to speak with express the desire to continue to join us via Google Meet versus in person. But I also want to make sure that we're respecting everybody's wishes. And so if there are student board reps who are interested in joining us in person in the boardroom versus Google Meet, we can talk about that and kind of rotate folks through. Our phenomenal technology department has been working to help us facilitate this shift in format. Really grateful for the time and energy they've spent. And I'll turn it over now to Ivor, who will update us on where we are for the tech components for our shift in meeting format.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. Good evening. Good evening, Chair Bouchard, members of the board, and Superintendent Mary Perry Reed. We are in a very good place, I think, for our hybrid board meetings. We have experimented with a couple different sets of headsets. We were not successful with the Bluetooth. They kept dropping the signal whenever we get on the Google Meets, but we have switched those out now for some hardwired headsets, which will plug into your devices, and those seem to be working quite well. On Thursday, we have a scheduled test up in the boardroom, which myself, Steve, and Elise will attend, and we're going to do it under board meeting conditions to just make sure that everything works fine. I anticipate that it will. I want to let everybody know it's going to be very familiar because we're still going to operate with our Google Meets as we do now, whether you are at the board table or connecting from a remote location. Everybody at the board table will be wearing the headsets, which have a microphone so that we have the sound under control. We would be able to facilitate a live audience, socially distanced, in the boardroom, and they will be able to hear the interaction of the board meeting just as if they were either on the Google Stream or they're in person. It's going to be the same experience. I want to remind the board members to bring your device on April 6th. Make sure you bring your device because that's going to be very important that everybody has their device with them, even if you are at the board meeting or in the boardroom itself. Maybe come a little early and we'll get you all set up with your headsets and make sure that you're comfortable with them. And I think we'll be in good shape. I'll update the board chair and the superintendent on the results of our test on Thursday. I anticipate that they'll go well, but I'll make sure that I inform them of the results so that we can be ready for the 6th. And I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ivor. Any questions from my board colleagues?
I had one, Chair Bouchard.
Clerk Andreessen.
I'm not the clerk anymore.
Oh my gosh. That was like, I've been waiting for it to happen.
I know.
So ingrained. And here it happened. I apologize.
That is
Grayson.
It's totally fine. Ivor, I was wondering, the headsets that you're talking about, are they going to be adaptable to plug in, like, say, if you chose a laptop versus an iPad?
Yeah, they are. They have two different ways to plug in. They have the mini jack, which will plug into all the laptops, and then they also have a USB connection too that we can accommodate. So I think that we're set. I think I would recommend a laptop. If you have a choice, bring your laptop. I just think it'd be a better experience with it sitting in front of you, but we'll be prepared for either.
Okay, because some of us were only issued iPads. Thanks.
Any other questions for Ivor? Well, thank you so much, Ivor. Really appreciate your work and the team's work to make this happen. Rhoda and I are still talking about, how to facilitate in-person attendance and who, in terms of a staff member, might help us with that process to make sure that our community members who are attending are maintaining distance and wearing masks. And also for community members who attend, who just wish to give public comment before the board, a system to allow them to come in and give their comment and cycle through the room. I do want to make sure it's clear for our community members listening right now that we will still have our workshops and our meetings streamed simultaneously via YouTube. So you'll still have that option in terms of access. And then when it comes to leaving a public comment, you'll still have the opportunity to leave a voicemail that will be played during the public comment section of the meeting. So you will not have to attend in person to be able to give public comment. I think that's all I have in terms of an update. Any questions or comments from my board colleagues or our student board reps? Okay, well, I am really looking forward to physically being in the same space with you all. As an extrovert, I don't think that I've fully been processing how doing everything on a screen has impacted me. And I visited Normandale Community College, where I teach, but had not been physically for a year a couple weeks ago. And it was just like euphoric, like running into people in the hallway and maintaining distance and having a very safe masked conversation. So really looking forward to being with you all. And I promise not to be too euphoric, but definitely welcome the opportunity to be back at the table with you and also have physical attendance from members of our community who wish to do so. So thank you very much. We have a packed agenda this evening, and so we'll just keep moving here, and I will turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry-Reed for our budget update.
Thank you so much, Chair Bouchard, and good evening, board members, colleagues, student board reps, community members. Thank you, Ivor, very much for your work on helping us facilitate a hybrid school board experience. So for our time together this evening in providing our board directors and also our community members with continued budget updates, we do want to take some time to share some information. We're going to keep it a little bit less formal than we have in the past to really give board members the opportunity to ask questions and to help us anticipate some of the information that you may need or questions that you might have prior to the preliminary budget approval that will be happening in a couple of weeks. We are always, and Chair Bouchard is has also shared in this role, we always want to be thoughtful of catching anyone up to speed who may be tuning in for the first time, and just providing sort of a backdrop for that better explains where we are now and why. So essentially, we are in our second season, our second round of budget reductions, budget right sizing, budget reimagining here in Hopkins. Mostly due to declining enrollment that we had experienced for a number of years up until about 2 years ago. And thankfully, we were able to turn it around, and we had 2 years of exceeding our projections, but then COVID sort of smashed into the world, and most public school districts across the state of Minnesota and across the country experienced an enrollment hit or decline that was COVID induced. And so even though we expected to reduce our budget this year by about $2.5 million, that has iterated into about $3.5 million, mostly due to that recent enrollment decline. We were about 113, I think, students off of our projection as of March 1st. And so we have been trying hard to provide continual updates to keep our staff informed. And the board was good enough to put together 4 board community engagements to provide opportunities for our community members to listen in on some conversations and learn more, ask questions. So we're thankful for all the people who showed up to those events that happened very recently. Our Citizens Financial Advisory Committee reviewed some leading indicators and did advise us to plan for a 0% increase. Now, recently, the budget forecast has been more favorable, but we are still planning on not receiving an increase from the state, because that would be that follows our CFAC recommendations and is also a prudent way of moving forward. And so we have been engaged in that work of preparing our budget to be structurally balanced. Director Chapanduka and his team have been leading the work around building a predictable staffing model. And because we love acronyms in Hopkins, I think we are now beginning to call it a PSM, predictable staffing model, that is enrollment driven, that will help our principals very accurately predict the kinds of resources, both in the predictable staffing model and also in their discretionary allocations, that they will receive based on projected enrollment that will be used to staff buildings for the 21-22 school year. And so we've been working with principals on better understanding what that model is and what it does. We are having a couple of staffing retreats. So half of the day, a 4-hour retreat this Friday and an all-day retreat next Friday, where Dr. Lightfoot will lead us through some exercises so that principals can get some support in exercising their staffing allocations and actually putting together very concrete plans for moving forward. So there's a lot of work that has been involved in this process, and hopefully that framing allows people to understand where we are now. And I believe Tariro wanted to just provide some additional information to remind the board what work we have been engaging in and where we are now. And then we would love to invite board members to ask questions so that you have a very good understanding of where we are and the decisions that are ahead of us in upcoming board meetings. Director Chapanduka?
Thank you, Dr. Mary Perret. Good evening, Chair Bouchard. Good evening, board members. I hope you guys can hear me. Today I decided to come and do it from my home, because sometimes I have some issues when I'm in my office. So, so what I will do here is to continue our discussion in as far as where we left with the predictable staffing model. I wasn't planning really to do any formal presentation, but I decided to probably pull up my previous presentation, which I've updated with some more information. As a matter of fact, nothing really has changed from a formula base with our predictable staffing model from a staffing perspective. But we have more information in as far as some of the categorical dollars, which we've been trying to figure out how those will be distributed across our system. For example, with achievement and integration, we've come up with a formula which we have worked with our building leaders, one from both an equity and equitable standpoint on how we can allocate those resources on a formula base. So those calculations have been done and they've been updated to the predictable staffing model under the categorical. Same as with title dollars. Again, as it been presented previously with how we've treated title dollars, especially Title I dollars at Hopkins, and we are keeping that same model for fiscal year 22 with the understanding that we'll come back and review how, from a system perspective, those resources can be distributed across our system. So currently, our title dollars are distributed to 4 of our elementary schools. Based on 1 hour free and reduced counts, and also based on the other components which are actually within the ESA Act as far as what is allowable and how schools through the school improvement plans, they can get access to those supplementary resources which try to bridge the gap between available resources within our general fund and our other categorical dollars. So what I can do right now is I can actually do a presentation so that we probably can kind of refresh ourselves on some of the information we discussed at our February 16th meeting, and also answer some of the questions which we actually captured in one of the Sun Sailor newspaper articles as far as what we had talked about and what the delta looks like between what's really funded under the predictable staffing model and the other discretionary dollars which are at the hands of our building leaders. And as most of you know, I mean, Minnesota school funding is very complicated. It involves a lot of different formulas which are driving those dollars into our buildings, and some of those resources are really earmarked for specific items based on legislature, and some of the items are really very tight to move around. So we are well aware of that, and we've been building a document which we call a budget parameters document, which will guide our principals as they start to allocate those resources within their different buildings, and making sure that we are in compliant with the state provisions and the state requirements. And I know last time I had shown the predictable staffing model examples of about 4 different buildings. So I'll do the same. There's additional information on those allocation, which I just mentioned, and to entertain any questions you have.
Any questions at this point? Okay, great. Yeah, we can.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Thank you. Okay, so, I know last time when I did this presentation, I gave the allocation based on a number of schools we just picked up because of different variations within the demographics of those particular buildings. So the one I started with is Alice Smith. And again, what is driving the allocations based on the predictable staffing model are the components which you are seeing right now on the screen. One, enrollment, and that enrollment is based on projection. And again, with our projections, as you've heard from previous discussions, based on how we have done business as a school district, one from projecting at a system-wide level. So the projections we have right now are based on a system-wide level projection. What we are doing going forward is we'll try to start going into really granulating it at a building perspective, since there's so many different variations between our different classes in a building. So enrollment is a big factor. Our English learners, language students are also a big factor. We do receive some funding, but it's not meeting the demand. So English learners language is one of those areas where there's a cross subsidy from our general education aid to cover the gap between what we receive from the state and what the needs are within our system. We also plugged out the special education components. Again, special education, as you all know, we only receive about 60% of our special education funding, but our needs are beyond that. So the district, through the general education aid, supplements about 40% through a cross subsidy for special education. And then the other component which drives our allocations is the free and reduced. As we've discussed in the in previous meeting with some of the categorical dollars, meaning compensatory dollars are mostly driven by free and reduced lunches and calculated at state level by building, and those dollars distributed into our system, as well as some of the title dollars. They are also driven by free and reduced lunch. So those components are what we've used as our foundation for the calculation we've developed to equitably and equally distribute resources into our system. The other component which is not factored in, which I will discuss later on, is that component with the basic per student, which is the remaining dollars after we have made all allocations into our buildings, into our departments, into our district-wide initiatives, and any remaining dollars being equally distributed based on each student across our system. So the first component, again, this is a refresher, and please feel free to stop me if you have any questions. And I can't see you, so you have to probably just let me know. So the initial components was us building that foundational framework, which we used to start allocating these resources, again, based on what is our base foundation. What do we need to open a building? And those components were actually put together, and we had a series of conversations with our building leaders, with some of our system leaders, to make sure that we had captured everything. And that being the base model, we went ahead and calculated from an average costing perspective what each position will cost, and then determined based on the number of allocations. We determined based on those calculations, based on the adult to student ratios, based on the need for some of the administrative support we need in a building, based on some of the professional development requirements. We ended up calculating the FTE allocation at a base allocation model and then costed it out. So what you see here, I'm not going to go through all the positions, is what we determined as the best allocation into our buildings, which will be complemented by some of those categorical dollars. And again, if we look at the old model, each building was different. So from a standardization process, I wanted to make sure that at least there is some standard across our system as we allocate these resources and as we try to identify any missing links between our budget as well as what we were expending between our individual buildings and the needs and priorities in those buildings. We did the same thing for special education. So this is the base allocation at Alice Smith, and with special education, most of the components in the past have mostly been handled at the central office level or central administration level, with those resources being allocated into our buildings. So what we've developed here is to also give some autonomy into our building leaders as far as those decisions on special education and what that looks like within our different spaces. So this is something we worked with our special services department, Director Founder Contreras and the team to come up with the model. And the model is not really so different from how some of these allocations have been going into the buildings, but we just tweaked so that it actually is standardized across our system, is formula-based, and it actually makes sense with available resources. The next section is the categorical, which I need to definitely be more clear about. And again, just looking at the article which came out in the Sun Sailor, as far as what can be used in the allocations of those categorical dollars. So some of our funding again is based on statute and how those dollars can be used. So we have our CPO, which is our capital projects levy, which is something we had to go before our community and our residents and get an approval to fund some of our technological support needs in our buildings. So some of those dollars are used to fund certain FTEs, which are supporting technology in our buildings. Some of those funds are supposed to be used for refreshing some of our technological equipment, buying new curriculum needs, buying new platforms such as the new Canvas information learning system we have for our students, our scholars, and our staff. So we did identify certain positions which are actually sitting in our buildings, being the media specialists, the media paraprofessionals. And right now we are in the process of identifying a new position, which is a data specialist position. I didn't put any dollar because we are still figuring out how much that will cost for the district. Then we also have title allocation. Again, title allocations are based on the ESA Act and requirements, so they have to follow certain prescribed needs and guidance based on federal guidelines. So Alice Smith is one of those schools which actually receives title allocations. The one difference we've done is to make sure that there's autonomy at the building levels based on the priorities, based on the title plan, for principals to be very intentional, very creative on how those dollars are allocated and used for the benefit of the students who actually need the support as a supplement to all the other programs which are provided within that building. Same thing with achievement and integration. Again, achievement and integration is one of those allocations which is prescribed from a state level, just as the term specifies, to address some of our achievement and integration needs. And again, in the past, it's mostly been kind of centrally controlled, although most of the resources have been going into our buildings. But what we've done this time around is to create a formula which is based on demographics, which we sat down with our building leaders to make sure that we were all in agreement that this is more equitable and it addresses the equity issues with the demographics in those buildings. So there's an allocation across our system which is going into the buildings based on the achievement and integration plan. And I would invite Director Stephanie Herrera and Assistant Superintendent Nick Lightfoot, if you guys have any other questions as far as getting into what those plans look like across our system. But there's an allocation which is actually identified under the categorical dollars. And these allocations can be spread from an FTE standpoint, some of the purchase services, some of the supplies, based on the needs of those buildings. Another allocations we actually factored in was our operation allocations, which are those supplies, instructional supplies, any other ancillary supply needs and purchase services in our buildings. The only difference we did this time was to allocate a specific dollar amount per student to cover up for those supplies. So that's another discretionary allocation which will be used again based on our parameters, but at the discretion of building leadership and needs and priorities in those buildings. The other components with the compensatory dollars, again, like I mentioned previously, compensatory dollars earmarked from the state using the free and reduced counts on an adjusted count. And what the state does is actually does the calculation on their end by each building, and then just give us the allocation. And what we've done in the past, as most of you know, is we have spread these dollars across our system to address some of the class size needs and challenges. What we've done this time is to allocate those compensatory dollars to follow the students who are actually generating the resources in those buildings. And again, based on the state guidance, based on the district parameters, those dollars will be used in the discretion of the building leaders and their teams to address some of the needs in those buildings as guided by compensatory state guidelines. The final component, which is the most flexible of these funds, is the basic per student, which, as I've mentioned previously, is based on the remaining dollars after we've allocated all the building allocations based on the predictable staffing model, as well as the department allocations. Any remaining dollars were actually taken and divided by the total enrollment of students based on the projections in our district and multiplied by the total enrollment in a building. So those are some of the discretionary dollars which are flexible to be used to cover some of the differences between what was allocated on the base model with the predictable staffing model, as well as some of the remaining needs in a particular building. So that's one of the examples I have. I'll take any questions you guys may have and I can move to the next score. Again, everything is based on the same framework.
Thank you, Director. Question.
Hi, Director Chabanduka. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Director Ko. How are you?
I'm great. So I have one quick question to help myself with some context. So we've talked a lot about the predictable staffing model. And so what percentage of the $3.5 million that we are attempting to save, what percentage of that is going to be achieved by the predictable staffing model? Is 100% of that going to be achieved? And if not, where is the remaining going to come from? From allocations, or where exactly is it going to come from?
Thank you, Director Ko, for that question. Let me clear my throat here. Okay, if I understand your question well, so there's a combination of factors here. The predictable staffing model, which is actually impacting the buildings, and the 7% reduction at the department level will actually make us accomplish the 100% of the $3.5 million deficit.
So just so I'm clear, over 90% of the is going to come from essentially the staffing model.
So when we look at our structure right now, about 82% of the district's expenses are staffing. So staffing within our buildings, staffing within our departments. So the majority of the expenditures are coming from that structural realignment of our staffing, but we also have factored in some of the inflationary consumer price index, which have always been factored into our budget. We are having departments eat those. So when we talk about, so right now, based on the CFAC's recommendation of the 3% increase for our cost of living adjustments, so those have already been factored into the allocations into our buildings. The departments have to eat those. We increased our benefits by an extra 2% from 34 to 36%. Those have already been factored into the allocations going into the buildings. Departments have to eat those components. And then the 2% consumer price index, those are all the components which are actually coming into play. If I probably put it in a more refined way, so out of the $3.5 million, about a little over $2 million is really addressed at the building level after we factored in the increases in cost of living adjustment, after we factored in the increases in benefits, and a little over $1.2 million is coming out of the departments. But then when you look at the allocations, as I mentioned in my previous discussion at the March 2nd meeting, about 67% of our budgets are actually directly hitting into the buildings, 9% at the department level. And then about 24% are district-wide initiatives, which are a lot of the components which are probably not even included in the predictable staffing model. So, for example, when you look at the predictable staffing model, it's not including components like the custodians, components like the engineers who are in the buildings, components like the food service staff and support elements which are actually residing in the buildings, just looking at this from the core staffing needs from an instructional standpoint.
Thank you very much. So those additional services like janitorial and things like that, so those, even though that they're not in the staffing model per se, you're still making decisions based on need, similar to how you're doing with the predictable staffing model. You're just not utilizing the same exact document.
All right.
Any other board member questions or comments at this point? Director
Chair Bouchard.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, Director Adams.
Yeah, I have a question for Trero. This essentially puts the staffing decisions in the hands of the principals. And I'm wondering, A, how comfortable are they with that? And B, where are they at in the process right now?
Thank you, Director Adams, and I'll have Dr. Mary help me with some of that stuff. I mean, I can start the framework and I'll get the opportunity to hear. It depends, I mean, from a perspective of where are they. Sure.
Oh, it's that voice again. Your audio is not working properly. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
The
So
same
I can
earlier during cabinet.
I can exit and come back.
Okay.
I'll exit and come back.
Okay. Well, thank you, Treasurer Adams, for your question. So, cabinet leaders and myself, we are all in partnership with principals on a weekly, sometimes daily basis. So yes, the principals are they're the primary owners of these staffing decisions at the school sites because they know their staff the best, and they also know their students, and they know what they know the details of the reimagining school exercises and activities that they and their building leadership teams and or staff have had. However, we are doing this work, hopefully, in what principals would also experience as true partnership. Dr. Lightfoot is our resident expert on staffing. And so I mentioned earlier during my framing that we're having a staffing retreat this Friday and also next Friday so that principals have the space, and we'll break up the time between whole group, between, huddle up and have small group with just elementary, small group with secondary work time, so that the principals are getting, all of the scaffolding and the support that they need to be able to make the decisions that they feel are best, but the decisions are not made in isolation. They're made in partnership with all of us and also with Dr. Lightfoot's guidance. So hopefully that answers your question, and I don't know if Nick wanted to add anything else.
Good, thank you.
Well, Rhoda, just one other question. Do they have a deadline to make their decisions? Because we've got to put a budget together here, and I'm anxious to see what their input is.
Yes. So we know that you have a preliminary budget to approve the next time you meet as a board. And so we know that our work in the next 2 weeks is critical because we do want to get to a point where we can be fairly definitive, knowing, okay, these are the individual staff members who have indicated that they are going to retire after many years of service in our system. These are the individuals who we think might be impacted by a job reduction because of these reductions and restructuring work that we need to engage in. So we want to be definitive, not just about the who, but about the total FTE amount. And so that is the work that we have ahead of us in the next couple of weeks. And we hope to be able to provide that level of detail to the board as well.
All right, thank you.
Rhoda, I just had a couple follow-up questions regarding staffing. So at what point will the principals be communicating staffing needs for next year internally? And I don't necessarily mean specifics around that, but making sure that our staff at the building level are, looped in and very aware of where we are in the overall process.
Thank you for the question, Chair Bouchard. We had that conversation today with our principals. One of our principals, actually our principal at Alice Smith, provided a summary to all of us about the hour-and-a-half staff meeting that he had with his staff, going over in great detail the predictable staffing model, how the categorical revenues, the discretionary fund allocations work, and provided space for staff to ask questions. And he said that he felt, and staff did provide feedback, that they appreciated the transparent process and the opportunity both to look at some of the things that are positive and that we're all looking forward to with all of the possibilities, but also the hard decisions that have to be made, some of the constraints that we're also facing at the school and at the system level. And so the commitment that we made to our school principals, because they're all going to have these staff meetings in the next week or two, is to let us know if they needed help with putting together a staff meeting with talking points, being able to clearly articulate any of these, pretty specific budgeting pieces. And then our director of principal leadership is also putting together some kind of a link or a toolbox so that principals can share their ideas and share their slide decks with each other. So I think principals are going to get some good support around facilitating those staff meetings at their sites in these next 2 weeks.
That's really wonderful. I appreciate hearing about all that work that's been done, because I just want to name the difficulty of being a teacher in this moment, because I am one. And we've been through, this really complex time together. And we understand, that institutions across the state are facing these budget challenges. And, all of the leaders who I know and respect and interact with on a regular basis, including the members of this board and this cabinet, that we are all doing absolutely the best we can with the resources at our disposal and really trying to set up our district for success. And at the same time, it's difficult when we know that there are people in our system who will not be with us next year for a variety of reasons. And I think just remaining in this complexity and naming that and not glossing over it is really important. And it sounds like that is the work that the principals are engaged with right now with their staff. And I'm just really grateful to hear that. So thank you. I had another question. Just this is more specific. So the data specialist position that was part of the Alice Smith predictable staffing model. I was just curious about that, and if you could tell us a little bit more about what that position is and if there will be that position at the other elementary schools as well.
Yes, I might ask Director Nelson to help me with this one. So we are planning on leveraging our capital projects levy dollars to fund these school data specialist roles, one at every site. And the purpose really for the role, as we become more savvy and sophisticated with our use of data, and as we seek to increase how data is used consistently across our sites, we want to make sure that we're properly staffing that effort. We also want to make sure that whether it's transportation support or support enrolling new families at every site. We just want to make sure we have the expertise and the staffing there who have the skill to interface with some pretty sophisticated data systems, pretty sophisticated student information systems and other data systems. And so the idea is that there would be one school data specialist at every site. It is a new role. And Mr. Nelson, is there anything else that we could say about this role to help board members and community members better understand what we're trying to achieve here?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Reed. Yes. At our secondary schools for many years, traditionally, we've always had the scheduler role. And the purpose of that role is to ensure that all students are properly and completely scheduled in our student information system, Infinite Campus. This is going to be a similar, this role of this school data specialist is going to take over scheduling at all of our schools. We need to schedule their Hopkins experience to the degree that we now are scheduling our secondary students, and maybe even beyond, as we use data to really identify the elements of the Hopkins experience that correlate to successful outcomes. We want to know that so that we can ensure all of our students have that opportunity. And so we hope to be able to increase the level of our scheduling to include things like activities and clubs and athletics, so that we can look back to see if participation in any of those leads to success for our student body. So we also have adding to that responsibility of our scheduling is also going to be the responsibility to, in essence, basically make sure that our staff is scheduled accurately in our ERP system, Skyward. So they're going to have responsibility for our two core data systems to ensure that our data we have full data integrity, that it's accurately reflected in our data systems and it's in there timely, so that all of our systems that feed off of those data systems, all the downstream systems, also receive that accurate data and we're best able to serve.
Thank you very much. That provides a lot of clarity. Any other board member questions or comments at this point? So it looks like we can turn it back over to Director Chapanduka.
Okay, thank you, Chair Bouchard. I'll go back to my presentation again. Okay, so if you guys start feeling like I'm kind of losing my voice or my sound, please let me know. I think my computer sometimes needs some refreshing. So the next school I picked up just to kind of show the variation in some of these allocations was Meadowbrook. Again, using this very same framework and the same concept which we have done at all our elementary schools. Again, based on the formula and the base data sets. We just have the same components for Meadowbrook and every one of our schools. The area will probably focus more when we look at a building like Meadowbrook from a demographic standpoint, is on the categorical dollars, because that's where you start to see. That's where you start to see some of the differences in as far as how those allocations varies due to one, some of the components within state funding and some of the components within how free and reduced can impact an allocation into a building. So I'm not going to spend more time on the base allocation because the base allocation is pretty straightforward. It's enrollment driven. It's based on those components which we previously alluded to. Same as with special education. But then when it comes to categorical dollars, you can start to see some of the variations. So with the CPL, the components are pretty much the same. I mean, we are just funding them based on the support needed for, technological needs or all the other different components of which we receive funding for, and based on guidance from the state. Then when it comes to some of the categorical dollars which are driven by free and reduced lunches. So for example, when you look at Meadowbrook, due to their low levels of free and reduced lunches, they don't get any title allocation. So that's a component which is benefiting a building like Alice Smith, which is not really available for a building like Meadowbrook. They do get a achievement and integration allocation, again, based on the demographic formulas, which we put together across our different buildings and levels. They do get their operational allocation, which is the $120 per student, and also based on the total number of enrollment within the building. They get their compensatory dollars, but as you can see, the compensatory dollars, again, because of their low level of free and reduced lunches, their allocation for compensatory dollars is lower compared to some of the buildings which are receiving a higher percentage of free and reduced lunches. The basic per student, that one is equal across the system, since it's the remaining dollars divided by the total number of students in our district, multiplied by the total number of students in a building. And Meadowbrook is one of those schools which actually has a higher capacity of enrollment coming into that building, so they do get a fair share of the basic per student. So when we start looking at those components, so those are some of the challenges we are trying to address with the variations, especially those schools which don't qualify for some of the categorical dollars, in trying to identify and making sure that all our system, all our buildings are getting the resources they need. We are intentional about how those components will play into those specific buildings. We do have some of the components which we have not really factored in, which we are actually closely looking at with, any new enrollment which are coming into a building, and how we'll come back at some point in time and try to identify and I address those variations as we get more information and as we get more details about who is open enrolling into some of the buildings and what that looks like compared to the data set we have at this point in time. So that's a variation I wanted to bring to the table as we look at the demographics and how things are looking in our different buildings. And I'll take any questions if you have any questions at this time.
Director Chapin, and perhaps another member of cabinet, and I understand that there might not be a specific answer to this question yet, but I'm wondering if you could give your community an understanding of what some of the improvement and allocation dollars might possibly be spent on in terms of staffing, like what that could look like. Like, is it staffing partial positions or full positions? Kind of some of the discussions around that at this point.
Chair Bouchard, I think I missed part of your question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just wondering the integration and achievement allocations. I understand how the allocations are being made, but looking for a little more specificity around how those funds might be spent at each site as it pertains to staffing.
Sure, and I will allude Dr. Lightfoot and Director Herrera. And again, as far as achievement and integration is concerned, there are specific guidance and also based on a plan which the district does develop. And I will have Director Lightfoot kind of give the board more light on that.
Sure. Thank you, Director Chapin-Duca. Chair Bouchard for the question. Specifically with the A&I dollars that we get, they are to supplement the activities that are related to integration and specific academic achievement. So we have 3 goal areas around our achievement and integration efforts, and those look as broad as increasing access to our educators of color, to the recruitment and retention of our educators of color, to our academic MTSS support models. And so the other elements that we look at are for deeper levels of family engagement and integration within our existing programs and structures. So that can look as broad on a district level contributions toward, for example, our community liaisons, for our Somali community liaison, Hmong community liaison, Spanish-speaking community liaison. So we integrate some of those on the district level, and then more localized our decisions around what it looks like for any kind of academic support components, what it looks like for family liaisons in buildings. And right now, where we're really enthused is that our building principals are looking at that goal, looking at what their present localized efforts have been, looking at where they found success with integration experiences and looking to expand those. So we, under Director Herrera's leadership, have given them the goals, and they are in concert and partnership with her and thinking through what those activities would be, and then creating KIPs, those key indicators of progress, that should be part of that specific goal and part of the A&I requirement as well.
Thank you. That is really exciting. I think about the unique needs and goals of each of our school communities, and to be able to customize those funds and how they're used a bit more, is one of the many benefits of this predictable staffing model. And I know I said this at a previous workshop and was quoted in the Sun Sailor saying this. So I'll double down or triple down, I guess, that, all of the work that's being done at this point is really going to pay dividends as we move forward in terms of, not just making our budgeting processes much more transparent and accessible for our staff and our community, and like knowing what to anticipate year to year, but also really getting into some of these equity concerns and how are we providing equitable funding allocations that truly serve each student in our buildings. And so I'm excited to hear about the work that's being done in that area. Thank you.
I might draw one specific attention to as well, and maybe Director Fisher and Director Herrera might speak to it, in part as we're reimagining summer and being more responsive to some of the funds that we have to look at as an expenditure toward the remainder of this year. We're also looking toward engaging our scholars and looking at them as additional resources within the district as well. So might be worth highlighting some of those activities too.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lightfoot, and thank you, Chair Bouchard. You're giving me goosebumps as I was listening to everything you were saying, and so I was hoping I'd have actually an opportunity to just reiterate what you were saying about equity and how budget can be used as a key lever in ensuring that we're moving programs forward in a way that is equitable. And another key component is the data collection aspect. So working with the our data scientist, and Ms. Holm is helping us to identify what are the data points that we're paying attention to and developing our strategies, and then how are we going to continue to monitor the progress of the strategies to ensure that we're reaching the goals that are outlined in the KIPs that Dr. Lightfoot spoke to. And it's been great working with Director Fisher and also with Principal Ballard at the high school. So Director Fisher, I don't know if you want to go into a little bit of the details, but we basically built upon the Royal Connections program that existed earlier on and was phenomenal. And we got really great feedback on that. And that's how we're going to continue to build out the Royal Connections program using some of those A&I dollars. So Director Fisher, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you to Dr. Lightfoot and Director Herrera for your support and collaboration in this whole process. So we are excited about the way we're using the A&I funds to run this Royal Connections program. We've been working very carefully with staff at the high school, Principal Ballard and Carol Tracy, who runs a peer tutoring program at the high school. We are able to expand this program and support high school scholars ages 16 and up to run enrichment classes for K-12 students as well as community members. So it'll be intergenerational. And we can pay them at the rate of $15 an hour to run those courses. We are also hiring tutors, again, high school students age 16 and older, to be peer tutors in our schools. So K through 12, we'll work with the principals to see what type of support scholars in their buildings need, whether it's one-on-one or kind of a virtual classroom tutor, small group type thing where we put a computer in the room and the tutor is listening in on the lesson, and then a small group of students go over to the computer and work with this high school scholar on part of the lesson. I think we can be really creative about how we do some of this, but those tutors will also be paid at the rate of $15 per hour. So it's exciting because it all helps us towards our mission of creating a system that helps support more teachers of color. And of course, you know, when our scholars are learning from a racially and culturally diverse instructor, it really kind of encourages growth in those areas. So we're excited about what's happening now.
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled to hear that you're expanding the Royal Connections program. I have been bragging it up, not only because my parents learned how to do TikTok dances from a Royal Connections instructor last summer, but because, you know, I've been like a witness to both of the kids who live at my house engaging in some of these classes, and just the skill building and also honoring the talents and perspectives that our scholars bring into this space, I just think is so exciting, and that we're able to pay them is huge. So thank you for your work in that area.
And Bouchard, I just wanted to also add that the program is free to all participants as well. And that was something that was a huge component of the program that we're also really happy we're able to do.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's wonderful. Any other board member questions or comments at this point before we hand it back over to Director Chapanduka? All right, Director Chapanduka, back to you.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard, and thank you, Dr. Lightfoot, and thank you, Director Herrera, thank you, Director Fisher. I'll go back to my presentation.
Your audio off.
Again? Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. Let me exit and come back again. I think that's the only way it helps. So just a minute. Sorry about that.
I mean, it does sound kind of cool, you know?
It does.
Little
We-
Darth Vader.
We had a great laugh with 45 leaders on a call this afternoon when it happened. It came at the right time, so there was some good laughter.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Is it better? Okay, thank you. Okay, again, I'm sorry about the audio again. The next two examples I have here are at the secondary level, just to show you some of the variations between the allocations at the elementary level and at the secondary level. Again, the framework is the same. There's a difference, with the secondary from a perspective of the adult to student ratio, as well as the schedules at the secondary level. So those are some of the variations in the programming at the secondary, being a bit different from the standardization at the elementary level. But the framework is pretty much the same. The allocations from a base model kind of mirrors what we did discuss it with the elementary buildings. The one component, as we move to obviously the categorical, again, there are certain categories which are standard across our system. For example, with the CPL, the one difference you see at the mostly the junior highs is with the ADSIS grant, which is actually right now at this point in time is only being applied at the junior highs, which is West Junior High and not junior high. Otherwise, the other components are pretty much similar to what we've discussed. With they receive an allocation for their achievement and integration, and again based on the plan, they receive an allocation for their supplies. They receive an allocation for their basic per student based again on the standard formula, and then they also receive their allocation on compensatory based on the free and reduced. The adjusted count is calculated by the Minnesota Department of Education. So those are some of the different variations at the junior high level. At this point in time, they are not getting any title allocations, but that's something we'll go back to refine as we move into fiscal year 2023, as well as looking at a comprehensive analysis of our ADSIS grant, whether we keep it at the junior highs or we spread it across our different buildings, both at the elementary and the secondary levels. And I know we don't have a lot of time left, so I can just probably jump into the high school. That's the other one I picked up, and then I can take any questions before we close the meeting. So again, the high school, obviously the high school holding the highest number of the students in the district, so their allocation is also larger. Their needs are also more than the needs in our different buildings. And at the same time, their schedules are really unique and complicated. So it poses some of the challenges we had to tweak as we identified that standardization. And the good thing is, unlike some of the bigger school districts, we only have one high school. So from an allocation standpoint, it's just unique to that particular building. But again, the framework is the same. the positions might look a bit different, considering the level of service and support required at the high school vis-a-vis the allocations which are going into our buildings. That's why the funding tool is also factoring into place those components. As you can see with the secondary, the categorical level, the only thing which I just put a placeholder on there is the alternative learning centers, which if you guys have any questions, we can have Director Lightfoot give us more detail. I know you addressed this at some of the meetings before, but it would be good to get another refresher. So the alternative learning center budget is mostly applied at the high school and the junior high schools, considering some of the summer programs, some of the alternative programs with the HUB, and some of the targeted allocations. So that budget is mostly controlled at the central level, but pretty much all the resources are going into the secondary buildings. And the part of the reason why it's handled at the central level is some of the funds generated by that budget, more of funds which are actually generated based on a program. So we try to make sure that we are monitoring those components, but the majority of those resources are really impacting, the independent and alternative programs, as well as our summer programs and any other programs which have not been covered within some of the allocations. They receive achievement integration allocation, as well as the other components between compensatory basic pay students and the operation allocation. What has not been factored in, like I mentioned in direct response to Director Cole's question, is those components within the operations and maintenance, the custodians, the engineers, some of the capital outlays in our buildings. Those are not factored into this model. Those are really actually handled at the district-wide level. So that's what I have in a nutshell. All these components, what we've done is we've pulled all these components and put them into our cloud-based platform we've been building, which is the My Budget file, so that principals and building leaders don't really need to spend time toggling between spreadsheets or manual papers. All this information, all the formulas are built into the application. All they will do is just to go in there and start allocating their resources based on the formulas, based on what the framework looks like, and then everything will be fed into our system and eventually into our enterprise resource planning system, which is our Skyward financial system. With that, that's all I have. Again, I'll entertain any questions you may have for the secondary, and I'll also allude to my colleagues here if there's any other information I missed, either with the timelines or the next pieces of information we need to provide to the board and the community.
Thank you very much, Duca. Looks like we have a question. Want to be mindful of time. We do want to take a break at 7:30, and I know that we have our transportation update that we need to get in here too. So with that in mind, Director Cool.
Very quickly, if there's somehow some way that the Minnesota government would provide additional dollars, then I think Treasurer Adams suggested to us that it may not go up this year. What is the plan? Will you be flexing the current models at all? Or will you be kind of allocating that money to make sure that in the future we don't have to have large cuts?
Thank you for that, Director Ko. So, actually, the interesting piece about this new way of budgeting is it actually just give us a platform that any extra dollars based on the formula will be allocated back into the buildings. So, if we receive any extra money after the effect, based on the enrollment, based on the calculations, based on those components with the basic pay per student, will just take those dollars and distribute them into our buildings. One of the things we've been actually also factoring in is just to make sure that we've addressed all the components. Again, this is the first time the district is getting into this process, so we know and we are aware that sometimes things may break just because not everybody is really aware of all the other components which need to be factored in. So if we get any additional resources, whether it's a 1% or 2%, we are planning to make sure that those dollars are really used in getting back into the buildings.
Excellent. Thank you. Vice Chair Andreessen.
Thank you. Just really quick, I saw on both the junior high and the high school spreadsheet a staff position called inquiry specialist. I'm wondering, is that a current staff position that is at those sites and if not, well, anyway, regardless, what is that staff person? Because I am not aware of their role.
Sure. Yeah, no, actually it's on me. So that inquiry, we're playing around with a different name for our media specialists. So that the inquiry specialists, the media specialists who are already in the building. So and that name is actually good. We are keeping it as the media specialist. But initially I put it down on my framework as the inquiry specialist because those conversations were going around. Which we may come back later on. And I don't know, Dr. Emara or Director Eto, if you guys have any additional thoughts.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, I think that's right. We had talked for some time about how to leverage our media specialists' formal training in the area of research and inquiry and how they might be empowered to facilitate inquiry-based lesson design and learning for our students. But Director Chapanduka is right. We probably need to change that back to media specialists, even though as a system we might again move in that direction. But for now, it should say media specialist.
Thank you.
Dr. Mary Perry Reed, would you like to lead us into our transportation update?
Oh, sure. Thank you, Chair Bouchard, and thank you, Director Chapanduka, for presenting some information to all of us, especially to our board members, about how we are supporting our schools through the budgeting and predictable staffing model process. To transition to transportation, and I will ask Director Chapanduka to, again, take the lead in helping us understand some of the more detailed aspects of this transition that we'll experience here in Hopkins. So we've had a long-term relationship, Hopkins Public Schools, with our bus provider, MTI, and we have done the work of looking for an organization that we may partner with in continuing to provide those bus services, those transportation services that many of our students and families need, so that students can be present for in-person learning in our schools. And so the world of transportation is it's a very intricate world, lots of lots of infrastructure, lots of technical work in the routing, in hiring and supporting bus drivers, in making sure that kids are picked up on time, brought to school safely, and then brought back home again. So it's a big operation. And as the Director of Business Services, Torero has been working closely with our Director of Transportation, with our Assistant Director of Transportation, who does routing for us, and also with the managers over at MTI in the busing space. So Torero, would you like to talk about the work that we are doing to transition to a different model?
Thank you, Dr. Mary Reid, and thank you again, board members and communities, and allowing me to actually give an update on where we are with our transportation contract. As alluded to what Dr. Mary Reid said, so our current contract with mainline transportation, which is abbreviated MTI, actually spans about 17 years. MTI has been doing transportation partnerships with the district for the past 17 years. And our current contract with them expires on July 31st of 2021. So what we decided to do was to actually, as some of you know, there's been some challenges with transportation in the last couple of years. My understanding is there's been some strain in the last 3 to 4 years, which have resulted in, communication breakdowns, and sometimes the district ended up outsourcing services to other contractors to assure timely student transportation. So what I wanted to do is to see what is happening out in the market there, which is something we are supposed to do anyways, time and again, especially with vendors we've worked with in the past. So we did sometime in January, we ran an RFP, which initially was responded to by about 5 transport service providers. We expressed some interest, and currently the transportation world is upside down. With the challenges with COVID-19 and what ended up transpiring, even though when the pandemic hit school districts, there was the directive by the governor that, we're supposed to pay our contractors even though they were not transporting our students. So we did engage with MTI, just like all other school districts did with their contractors, to make sure that at least we pay them not 100%. So we ended up paying MTI about 90% of what they would have been paid if they'd operated in a regular environment. So we did run the RFP, and then we ended up receiving a solid response from one Kanban, and this name is Lake Country. It's a Minnesota Kanban, and MTI did not submit a request for proposal for this. So we did work with them, and right now we are at an advanced stage with our negotiations with Lake Country. They've come up and we'll be introducing them to the board soon. And one of the things which are exciting, which we've done with the negotiations at this point in time, is to make sure that we put our drivers at the forefront of the negotiations. One of the challenges which we have seen in the transportation world is one lack of finding the right candidates with the CDL licenses for drivers. just because of the fact that maybe the pay range is not really competitive enough or attractive enough to keep drivers. So one of the provisions we are doing is working with Lake Country to make sure that we put a provision there to get the right candidates who are paid appropriately and given the incentives. I truly believe that drivers, even though they are contracted from a third-party company, they're an extension of our mission and goals. And getting the right people into those buses, since they are the front face of the district every morning and at the end of the day, is critical to achieving and accomplishing our mission and goal. So right now we are in an advanced stage. We'll be introducing Lake Country to the district, and MTI has expressed that they are getting out of business with Hopkins, and we are proud that we are at this stage, and we are thankful to what MTI did for the district. 17 years is a long relationship, and we are where we are, and we feel like we are in the right spot and we are moving in the right direction. I know there's been some breakdowns here and there, which are common in transportation, and we want to minimize that. And we've put in buffers with the negotiations making sure that we provide the latest technology in our buses. We provide all the whistles and bells as far as how communication is channeled between our transportation routing system, our families, triggering some of the technologies we already have in the district. For example, My Stop, which is an app which allows families to be able to see buses as they pick up and drop their students live in production. We are also triggering some of the apps like E-Link, which allows families to log in and be able to get the current information for their students, as well as the tagging system, which allows students get into a bus to be identified through the electronic system that they are getting in the correct bus, and you can see their pictures. And that will alleviate some of the challenges we have seen in the past with students being dropped at the wrong bus stop or students getting into the wrong buses. So from a high level, that's what I have. We're at an advanced stage with the new contract, and hopefully this will be a good partnership between the district and the community, and the contractor.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Chapanduka, for that high-level overview. Understanding that we'll have a more specific and detailed discussion about that before next school year. I'm sorry, in my higher ed language, before next school year. And we will move into our break now. And I look forward to welcoming you all back to the table shortly before 7:45. Thank you very much. Okay, we can get started. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is called to order at 7:45 p.m. I am Chair Jen Bouchard, and a warm welcome to our community members who are joining us via the YouTube live stream. Before we get started, I'll just ask my board colleagues to confirm that you're here in the call. Director Adams.
Here.
Director Ahmed.
Here.
Director Andreessen.
Here.
Director Khan. Director Cool.
Here.
Director Peterson.
Here.
And our student board representatives are with us this evening. Student board reps, if you could just state your name for the minutes right now, that would be great.
I can start with Elliot Berman.
Parker Chelikowski.
Kimura Searles.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So glad that you're all with us this evening. Our first agenda item is open agenda, and it's typically during this time that we hear public comment. We did not receive any voicemails for public comment this evening, so I don't have anything to play for you. Just a note to our listening public that we will be shifting our board meeting format to allow for more in-person participation beginning April 6th. However, the option to leave a voicemail for public comment will still remain. So you do not have to physically attend the school board meeting to be able to leave public comment. You'll still be able to leave a voicemail moving forward. Wonderful. So with that, we'll move to our student board representatives reports, and I will turn it over to you, student board representative cohort coordinator Elliot Berman.
And I will pass it to Parker.
I have the sports report this week, or this, I don't know how often this happens. I'm not prepared. This past week, I happened to know, because I had some friends in it, I do Nordic skiing, and we had our whole girls sections team went to state, and we had one boy qualify individually to state in Nordic. I know that our Alpine team qualified for state also. And I know that we got an individual at 8th place in the state meet at Nordic. So then there's also the Athena and Apollo Awards, which are given out yearly to scholars that who have high success in academic areas and athletics. And this year, our award winners were Lacey Provenzano, who I know, and George Jackson.
Awesome. So this week, Mca Testing is taking place this Friday, the 19th. For sophomores, it is reading, and for juniors, it's math. Seniors who apply to college are starting to hear the last of their acceptances within the coming weeks through the beginning of April, and are beginning to make those decisions. So it's really cool for those who are choosing to go to college next year to see what everybody's doing and where everybody's going. And then next Friday is the last day of term 3 for Hopkins High School and the junior highs. And it's really, compared to this time last year, like this was the week that everything happened this time last year. We were going on a big break, and now it feels like we're just like barreling towards the end of the school year. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Events so Hopkins High School is moving into full in person on Monday the 22nd, as most of you know. So that's opening like a bunch of like possible events. So students are hoping for a spring week as we head into in-person learning, usually as opposed to what we usually have, which is a winter week, which usually takes place in February. And seniors learned this past week there was a change to our kind of prom graduation thing that is going to happen. They've moved prom to after the graduation ceremony as kind of a senior party as well. But it is to make sure that all those who want to really have and be at graduation can be there without the fear of prom happening before and parties possibly happening after and maybe a spread. So it quells that problem and make sure that people can have that one event. I know most seniors rather walk than have a prom. So that is very exciting to have. And yesterday, Caring Awards were announced, and Hopkins High School students were sweeping all of the awards. So Treasurer Adams was one of the presenters, and also Chair Bouchard. So it was really nice to watch it and see Hopkins representation all throughout it. So there we go.
Thank you very much, student board representatives. And Elliot Berman was one of the recipients of a Caring Youth Award. So congratulations, Elliot. Any questions from my board colleagues for our student board representatives? Well, as always, we appreciate having you here. And it's so good to hear that there's some sort of sense of normalcy. Nothing is normal, but that you're still going to be able to have some of those opportunities here as we, like you said, barrel toward the end of the school year. So thanks so much for your updates. Great. Next, we'll move to the superintendent's report, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard, and good evening to board members and student board reps, colleagues, and community members, and thanks to the students for your updates. I really enjoy hearing from you. I am going to share my screen for just a couple of slides here, so let me know when you can see it, please.
We can see it now.
Okay, perfect. Well, even with the snow yesterday and today and the spring break fever that's truly in the air, our schools are continuing to do a great job with our scholars, providing the much needed in-person learning for the vast majority of our elementary and secondary students, and also continuing to meet students' academic and social emotional needs virtually for those who request distance learning. Our learning models are going really well. Our secondary students are attending 2 days per week, and as Elliot shared earlier, we are moving to 4 days per week beginning next week, and I really hope that we can keep that up even after spring break. Our elementary students have been attending 4 days a week for quite some time now, and they have been recently invited to attend on Fridays as well, and this will start after spring break. This is a really hard decision to make because we want to serve our students and families at high levels, and we want to support our staff. It just so happened when we were surveying staff and families that the majority of families who are sending their scholars in 4 days a week did want a fifth day, and it also happened to be that most of our teachers expressed continuing to need that Friday for extra collaboration and planning time. And so because we want to stay competitive and also because we want to meet our students and our students' needs and our families' requests, we did make that hard decision to pivot to 5 days a week, which will start next week and also is in line with about 90% of surrounding districts. And so we need to find ways of continuing to support our teachers during this time who have just been really incredible throughout this whole pandemic year. Some other things that hopefully you'll find interesting. In our work to further Vision 2031, our spring task forces have met 4 of their 6 times. They will meet a 5th time tomorrow afternoon and then one more time after that. And their first significant assignment was to study their current state and to articulate a specific problem statement as a way of identifying that they accurately understand the problem that they're trying to solve for. And then their second chunk of work last week and this week is to identify solutions that address the root causes of that problem they identified, and then we'll ask those task forces to turn the solutions into recommendations for the system's consideration. On the advocacy front, a small group of Region 9 superintendents, including myself, organized meetings with influential legislators to advocate for a large target on the funding formula and also advocate for immediate and flexible funding for summer programming. So we held meetings with Roger Chamberlain, Jim Davney, and Zach Duckworth last week, and hopefully those conversations will influence the thinking of our legislators, and that will turn into support for districts across the state. In the area of partnerships, a few weeks ago, we were holding weekly labor and management conversations on Fridays to address some of the challenges surfacing during the elementary hybrid experience. We're now trying something slightly different and hopefully just as productive, which is a weekly dialogue with the HEA president and all building reps, including early childhood, elementary, and secondary, along with principals and cabinet leaders, to identify system level or system-wide problems that can be solved if we work together collaboratively and if we work together as a collective. So we're looking forward to those Friday afternoon conversations. And finally, I just want our board and community members to know that we are still conducting bi-weekly saliva testing, daily COVID management check-ins, which Dr. Lightfoot and a few others are a part of every morning, weekly pandemic task force meetings, and all the while our staff continue to secure their first and second vaccination appointments. We believe approximately 80 to 90% of our staff have had their first shot and are either enduring the 21 to 28 day waiting period before their second shot, or have actually had that second vaccination. And so this is really great news. It is hard to pinpoint the precise number of staff who have been vaccinated because staff are voluntarily responding to a survey that we send, I think, probably every other day. But we do think that level of vaccination is very high. And then, of course, we have spring break coming up in just a couple of weeks. And so we did provide some CDC and MDH guidelines to our staff and to our families so that they can be thoughtful about how they spend their time and how we can all work together to mitigate and hopefully prevent community spread. So that is it for my report, and I would be happy to take questions if there are any.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Perry Reed. Any questions from my board colleagues? Okay, excellent. With that, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Peterson.
All right. Let's see if I can do it without a notepad to remember everybody. Director Adams.
All right. Aye.
Director Ahmed.
Aye.
Director Andreessen.
Aye.
Director Kuhl.
Aye.
Director Khan.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye. And Chair Bouchard.
Aye, bravo, Clerk Peterson. Aye, 0 nays, motion carries. Next, we'll move to our consent calendar, and I would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I so move.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Peterson.
Director Adams.
Aye.
Director Ahmed.
Aye.
Director Andreessen.
Aye.
Director Khan.
Aye.
Director Kuhl.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye. and Chair Bouchard.
Aye, thank you, Clerk Peterson. We have 7 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Next, we'll move to the Treasurer's Report with Treasurer Adams.
All right, thank you, Chair Bouchard. As is customary, we have an enrollment report in the second meeting of the month. And this time I noticed that we had a decrease of 9 students since February, but they were all at the high school. So that's not untypical. We tend to lose students on our enrollment as they test out and graduate or get enough credits to graduate early. So we're back to our initial head count as of October 1st, exactly. And that was still 113 students less than what we had budgeted for this year. But we had a severe dip in November and December, and we've recovered from that. So we're back to where we started in October. On the expense side, we're 67% through the current fiscal year. Expenses are running at 54% compared to 58% at this time last year. So we're doing a good job of containing the expenses. Expenses of note include about $32,000 for the 9th installment of our workers' comp policy, over $10,000 for 500 new plexiglass desktop barriers, $8,555 for spring tuition at the University of Minnesota, saving our parents a significant amount of tuition, $14,550 for rehabilitation of the track at the high school. And we've continued to have expenses for ionization in our district facilities, and tens of thousands of dollars are being spent for ingredients and complimentary napkins and whatever that go along with our free meals. So we're going to continue the free meals through, I think, USDA says through July. We don't know what's going to happen after that. So with that, I move that we approve total disbursements in the amount of $298,528.14 for the period February 23, 2021 through March 8, 2021.
I have a motion to approve the Treasurer's Report. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the Treasurer's Report. Any discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Peterson.
Director Adams.
Aye.
Director Ahmed.
Aye.
Director Andreessen.
Aye.
Director Khan.
Aye.
Director Cool.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye. And Chair Bouchard.
Aye, thank you, Clerk Peterson. We have 7 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Next, we'll move to new business, and our first agenda item is policies and first reading. I'll turn it over to the head of our Policy and Monitoring Committee, Vice Chair Andreessen.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. Before we talk about the policies that are before us today, I just wanted to give everyone on the board and in our community an update about what the Monitoring and Policy Committee has been doing since we last spoke. We have been having discussions with our staff, community, and scholars around working on an equity policy, and are going to continue looking into that and having discussions with staff. We have also been working on a gender inclusion policy and also a policy about relations with law enforcement, as well as talking with different committees and stakeholders in our community about our bullying policy. So look for more information that we will be bringing before you, our board, and also the community around those issues. And to talk specifically about the policies before us tonight that we discussed in the monitoring committee, I invite Assistant Superintendent Nick Lightfoot.
Thank you, Vice Chair Andreessen, members of the board. This evening we have 3 policies that the committee has moved forward for board approval in first reading. The first is the health and safety policy. As you'll note, there were a few changes here, more clarification, and then additional items about the 1-year, second-year forecast information. That would be detailing the health and safety program as it relates to the long-term facility maintenance plans that are put in front of the board. So that was really the specific change made to 807. There were no specific changes that were made to the model MSBA policy. This is just a clarification for Hopkins practice and how the information comes forward. So with that, I would stand for any questions that individuals would have regarding policy 807.
Board member comments or questions? I think we can continue.
All right. Next one is 850, which is our pest management policy. You will note that here there is a change in title of the individual who is responsible for its oversight and application. So that is the specific change that was recommended for 850. General questions?
Looks like we're good.
All right, then the last policy is policy 903, which is visitors to school district buildings and community relations. As you will note, there were no specific changes that were proposed based on any MSBA, Minnesota School Board Association model policy changes, none there. We did not see any that we would recommend right now for policy 903. Any additional questions?
Thank you very much. I think we're good to go.
Wonderful. Well, those are the 3 for this evening.
Thank you. Sorry, I was like, am I muted? No, I'm not muted. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lightfoot and Vice Chair Andreessen. And with that, I would look for a motion that the board approve policies 807, 850, and 903 in first reading. Further, the board direct the administration to prepare the policies with suggested revisions, of which there are none, for approval in second reading at the next meeting as part of consent.
I so move.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the policies. Any discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Peterson.
Director Adams.
Aye.
Director Ahmed.
Aye.
Director Andreessen.
Aye.
Director Khan.
Aye.
Director Cool.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye. And Chair Bouchard.
Aye. Thank you, Clerk Peterson. We have 7 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Next, we can move into our board member reports. Who'd like to go first?
Chair Bouchard, I'll go.
Director Khan.
So this past week, Steve introduced me to AMSD. So, yeah. And then the second thing was that I got to tour Gatewood's new greenhouse, which is very state of the art. It was really wonderful to get a tour by Dr. Nolan. And he was very excited about incorporating curriculum with the biological and STEM programs that they're going to have. And it was really cool to hear that they're going to also partner with the University of Minnesota to aid in this. And that's my report.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Director Khan.
I'll go next.
Yay. Wait.
Well, on March 8th, a week ago yesterday, I had gotten a late call on Friday afternoon from MSBA asking if I would testify in the Senate Education Policy and Finance Committee against a bill, Senate File 1525, which would create state-funded accounts for students to undertake private and parochial education. And this is a bill of its type that comes up every session, but it's, to me, just patently unconstitutional because it uses public money to conduct, religious education for the most part. But so I testified. Roger Chamberlain is a senator who chairs that committee, and I was especially distressed at the end after they took all the testimony from various people. Well, three people testified against, and then they had about a dozen that testified for the bill. And Chair Chamberlain gave what amounted to a sermon about how bad public schools are and how private schools have the best results of any schools in the nation, and I was just kind of stunned. So that's what we're up against, and I'm sure we'll be up against this next session too. Luckily, in this case, there is no companion bill in the House, so it's unlikely for it to pass, but we're swimming against this current public funding for private education, which is very concerning to me. Like Chair Bouchard mentioned, I view the Caring Youth Awards on March 12th. I had introduced and nominated and introduced Liv Steen from the high school, but Elliot was there and George Jackson was there, and like Elliot said, Hopkins swept the Caring Youth Awards. There were a few from other schools, St. Louis Park, Minnetonka, and believe it or not, Watertown Mayor. But it's always a fun event to attend, even though it was virtual this year. On that same day, I also attended the first of 3 MSBA seminars on how to advocate with your legislators. And unsurprisingly, Hopkins checks all the boxes. So, as is typical when I go to things like this, I find out that we're already doing the best practices. And then at LAC, Nick talked about the tiered licensure issue, which is being proposed to be radically changed and not for the better, in my estimation. In a bill, it's House File 1081, which is a House Omnibus Policy Bill, for Education Policy Bill. And I read through a synopsis of it provided by MSBA, and it's distressing. There's 50 new requirements for school districts in there, including licensing changes, additional requirements on the world's best workforce. And as I looked through it, I didn't see any funding for any of these changes that are being proposed. So it unfortunately passed out of committee, and we'll find out if it gets amended at all to remove some of those changes. And then on Sunday, Pi Day, I accepted the invitation from the Technocrats Robotics Club at the high school and attended their Pi Day celebration in the staff parking lot at the high school. And it was very impressive. I got to talk with Jason Herzog, who's the advisor for the group. Jason is a graduate, a 2007 graduate of the high school, but he works at General Mills. And he's the guy that designed the machine that created the numbers for the Sesame Street cereal. So being an engineer has many different applications, you find out. So it's fun to talk to Jason and to talk to some of the parents, and the parents who are involved as advisors to the group are very motivated and motivating, I would say. So it was a great time. And that's my report, Chair Bouchard.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Director Adams. Any other board member reports?
Chair Bouchard.
Yes, Vice Chair Andreessen.
I just wanted to second Steve's assessment about the advocacy through Advocacy in Action through MSBA. I found the presentation really inspiring, but also very affirming that on the LAC we're doing everything right. Sometimes it's a little disheartening, though, when we hear things like you did, Steve, from Chamberlain, about how perhaps even when you do everything right, you don't get the result that you would like. So it was interesting and educational, and I think that we will, there's a series of them, so I think that we'll get into more kind of direct action and lobbying that we can do. I was really excited to attend the African American read-in that was hosted on YouTube. We got to hear from lots of scholars and staff, and even one of our student board reps, Imani, was there and shared an amazing and powerful poem. I would recommend to anyone to go back and view the recording. So that they can see all of those. I attended a District 287 meeting where they shared kind of progress that's being made on their strategic vision and the ways in which they're incorporating staff from member districts. And also, I was really encouraged to hear they have started including students in that process. So it was great to see that and the updates that they do at the beginning of each board meeting. It was, again, by a student and their experience in District 287, which is always delightful to hear from them. And there was a SEAC meeting that shared lots of really great, useful tips with parents for kind of navigating this distance learning COVID reality that we're in. We all know that it can be a very different experience depending on how you're arriving at school. And so it was really nice to get a lot of tips from our staff on how parents can create a more calm and less stress environment. I'm not going to say stress-free because I don't think that exists anymore in this reality. And I also attended the Empty Bowls, which I think was that Resource West and IAC did a great job of, or ICA did a great job of reimagining how that could happen during a pandemic, and they exceeded their fundraising goal. So well done, community. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much.
Chair Bouchard.
Director Cool.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. I will make this very quick. I did have an opportunity to visit my first AMSD meeting as a guest. Now, Steve did not introduce me, but it was a very, very great experience for me. I was very impressed with all of the information that was provided in a short period of time. So that was time well spent for me. I also, along with Director Andreessen, I sat in on the SEAC meeting, and I have to agree that presentation that was done by a few social workers was one of the best presentations that I have seen put out, and I would just love to see that sent out to every adjusted slightly, but sent out to every single parent, because there was so much great bits of information in there, and it could be adjusted for all families very easily. Also continued some conversations with several folks within Target Corporation, and they are very open to having some additional conversations about how to utilize, especially the high school, to help them fill positions at their Target stores, their area Target stores, especially for high school employment. Something that they have a lot of communication with schools around us. So I think that's something that I will continue to get information on to see if that's a partnership that we could create to catch up with some of our neighbors. And that's it.
John, I didn't introduce you because I checked all the attendees in the Hollywood Squares setup, and I didn't see you anywhere, so I didn't think you were there. So I'm sorry.
I even had a great suit coat on. You would have really liked the way I looked. Thank you.
I was going to say, that doesn't sound like Steve. Like, Steve is like the ultimate connector. So, yeah, blame Zoom, right? That's what I do all the time. Excellent. Thank you so much. Any other board member reports? Well, my board member report tonight is more of a reflection on conversations I've been having with our Hopkins Schools community members over the past few weeks. And it also consists of things that I believe are imperative for me to say as an elected leader at this time. From the local to the state to the federal levels, we're witnessing attempts at silencing, erasing, and criminalizing our LGBTQ+, gender non-binary, and gender expansive community members, especially our youth. Let me be completely clear. In Hopkins Schools, we value our LGBTQ+, gender non-binary, and gender expansive scholars, staff, and community members. LGBTQ+ history is the history of our community. It's the history of our state, of our country, and the entire world. LGBTQ+ literature opens our minds to new ways of thinking about identity, relationships, and so much more. No matter what our personal identities may be, this is all valuable knowledge, and it's crucial for truly understanding our world, systems of power, and our vast potential to make all of our communities places where people can show up as their full and authentic selves. Next, I'd like to acknowledge the fear and frustration that many of our Asian and Asian American teachers, scholars, and families have felt over the past year, filled with harmful and racist rhetoric surrounding the COVID pandemic. Within the past few weeks across our nation, there's been an uptick in hate crimes against members of our Asian American community. And we know that this has caused trauma for many of our immediate community members here in Hopkins Schools. And so I want you to know that we see you, we value you, and we are so grateful that you are part of our Hopkins Schools community. Lastly, the murder trial for Derek Shovin, which began last week, has been a source of stress and trauma for many of our Hopkins Schools community members, especially our BIPOC scholars, staff, and families who have experienced and continue to witness structural racism within the criminal justice system. I'm so grateful for our educators and leaders in Hopkins who understand these realities and the intersecting identities of our scholars and are actively finding ways to support them as they continue to be bombarded by reminders of how unjust our systems are in this country. I'm grateful for our scholars and so many of our community members who continue to speak truth and work for justice. My desire is that we all continue to work for inclusion, both structurally and culturally, and for systems that are truly just in every space in which we find ourselves, both here within our Hopkins Schools community and beyond. This is what's required of us in order to build a world where all of our Hopkins scholars will have the brilliant futures that they deserve. With that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Meeting on. Clerk Peterson.
All right. Director Adams.
Aye.
Director Ahmed.
Aye.
Director Andreessen.
Aye.
Director Khan.
Aye.
Director Cool.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye. And Chair Bouchard.
Aye. Thank you, Clerk Peterson. We have 7 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is adjourned at 8:25 p.m.